Good morning. Welcome to the PIOJ quarterly press briefing on the performance of the economy and outlook. Your presence here confirms that you have given us permission for your likeness to be used, and for the purposes of this event, your data will be held in accordance with the PIOJ privacy policy. Your mic will be muted until the discussion segment of the meeting. So thank you. The chair will start presently.
Good morning, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen of the media and those joining us virtually, thanks for coming to the Planning Institute of Jamaica's press briefing. Today, the Director General, Dr. Wayne Henry, will provide preliminary estimates on the performance of the economy for the July to September 2024 period. Dr. Henry is supported by Mr. James Stewart, Senior Director, Economic Planning and Research Division, and Mrs. Pisha Bryan Lee, Program Director, Vision 2030 Jamaica Secretariat. At the end of Dr. Henry's presentation, we will take your questions. Dr. Henry, you may go ahead.
Thank you so much, Marcia. Good morning, everyone. Before I provide the details on economic performance, let me take this opportunity to remind you of the purpose of these quarterly economic estimates provided by the PIOJ. The PIOJ presents preliminary estimates on economic performance for each quarter, approximately 6 weeks following the end of the quarter being reviewed. This is based on the latest available information from major data providers. This release of the preliminary estimate is consistent with protocols in modern economies globally, where it is a common practice to release preliminary estimates before the final official figures are published. In the case of Jamaica, the PIOJ releases the preliminary growth estimate within the first 6 weeks following the end of the quarter being reviewed, and Statin releases the official GDP figures at the end of the 3rd month following the quarter being reviewed. The preliminary outturn is used by various stakeholders, including our international development partners, the private sector, as well as the government, for whom the magnitude and direction of sectoral performance is critical to inform planning and policy-related decisions. Today, we are reporting an estimated contraction of 2.8% in real value added during the July to September 2024 quarter, relative to the corresponding quarter of 2023. The estimated outturn for the review quarter largely reflected the adverse impact of Hurricane Beryl and other hydrological events. The downturn is due to an estimated contraction in both the goods producing and the services industries. The industries which suffered the greatest impact from the hurricane were 1, agriculture, forestry, and fishing. Domestic crop production was severely affected, with 13 of 14 parishes recording a decline in hectares reaped during the review quarter. 2, mining and quarrying. The industry was adversely affected by Hurricane Beryl, which caused infrastructure damage to the port at Rocky Point. This necessitated the diversion of alumina exports to an alternative port, as well as tempered production. 3, hotels and restaurants. The cancellation of flights and diversion of visitors to alternative destinations adversely affected the country. 4, electricity and water production. The industry experienced significant damage and loss as a result of the destruction to infrastructure assets caused by Hurricane Beryl. Sections of the island were negatively impacted by the delays in restoring electricity, which had implications for production across other industries. 5, transport, storage, and communication. The industry was impacted by the closure of Jamaica's international airports and aerodromes and the consequential temporary cessation of travel to the island. Damage to the telecommunication systems, limited internet and phone access. Other factors impacting performance included weakened demand, which resulted in the curtailment of economic activities, This was reflected in a downturn in business confidence and the release of a second Level 3 travel advisory by the US State Department in July 2024. The first was in January 2024, warning passengers from Jamaica's largest source market to reconsider travel to Jamaica. A Level 3 travel advisory is the second worst ranking that can be issued. The worst is Level 4, which warns passengers not to travel to a particular destination. Real sector developments. Developments in the goods producing industry. The goods producing industry is estimated to have contracted by 6.5% due to lower output by all industries in the category. The agriculture, forestry, and fishing industry was estimated to have contracted by 13.5%, reflecting the adverse impact of weather conditions, particularly the effects of Hurricane Beryl. The industry's performance was reflected in declines recorded for other agricultural crops, which contracted by 12.9%. Lower production was recorded for 8 of the 9 crop groups, with the largest declines recorded for cereals, down 33.4%, condiments, down 21.8%, vegetables, down 17.3%, and fruits, down 16.6%. Additionally, lower output was recorded for traditional export crops, which decreased by 15%, largely reflecting contractions in the production of banana, down 18.7%, coffee, down 70.4%, and cocoa, down 74.2%. This was sufficient to outweigh increased production of sugar, totaling 11,671 tons, relative to no production in the corresponding quarter of 2023. Animal farming was estimated to have increased by 1.6% due to higher broiler meat production, up 3.4%. Mining and quarrying. Real value added for mining and quarrying contracted by 15.2%, reflecting declines in the bauxite and alumina and quarrying sub-industries. The lower output in the bauxite and alumina sub-industry was due to a contraction in alumina and crude bauxite production. Alumina production declined by 12.6% due to a reduction in the alumina capacity utilization rate to 37.1%, down 5.3 percentage points compared with the corresponding quarter of 2023. Crude bauxite production fell by 33.1%, reflecting lower demand from overseas purchasers. The average bauxite capacity utilization rate decreased to 27.2%, down 13.5 percentage points. The quarrying sub-industry was also estimated to have declined, reflecting lower production of all industrial materials and minerals except shale. The largest absolute declines were recorded for sand and stone and the limestone. Manufacturing. Real value added for the manufacturing industry contracted by an estimated 2% due to lower output in the food, beverages, and tobacco and the other manufacturing sub-industries. The contraction in the food, beverages, and tobacco sub-industry stemmed from lower production of edible oils, down 7.9%, edible fats, down 17.7%, and flour, down 3.1%, and beer and stout, down 21.6%. These were sufficient to outweigh increased production recorded for poultry meat, up 3.4%, dairy products, up 33.5%, and sugar and molasses, for which there were no production in the corresponding quarter of 2023. The other manufacturing sub-industry mainly reflected lower production in the petroleum products category. All products surveyed declined, led by fuel oil, down 53.9%, LPG, down 29.6%, automotive diesel oil, down 25.2%, and gasoline, down 24%. Also contributing to the downturn in the other manufacturing sub-industry was a decline in non-metallic minerals category, driven by declines in the production of cement, down 29.7%, and clinker, down 39%. Construction. Real value added for the construction industry was estimated to have contracted by 2.8%, reflecting an estimated contraction in both the building construction and other construction components of the industry. The industry's performance was constrained by a 10% real decline in the sales of construction-related inputs. The fall off in the building construction component was due mainly to the performance of the residential category, reflected in a 3.5% downturn in housing starts by the NHT. The total value and volume of mortgages disbursed declined by 16.5% and 22.8% respectively. Downturn in the other construction component was due to a decline in capital expenditure on civil engineering activities, largely stemming from 1, National Works Agency, which disbursed $0.9 billion relative to $8.3 billion in the corresponding quarter of 2023. The fall in expenditure reflected the winding down of roadwork activities associated with the South Coast Highway Improvement Project, SCHIP, as well as the impact of Hurricane Beryl, which hindered ongoing work. And 2, JPS, which disbursed $1.2 billion, down from $2.3 billion in the corresponding quarter of 2023. Disbursements during the quarter included expenditure on the repair and reinstallation of electricity generation and distribution infrastructure. In contrast, NROC disbursed $1.7 billion, an increase from the $1.1 billion in the corresponding quarter of 2023. Expenditure during the review period was primarily for the Montego Bay Perimeter Road. Developments in the services industry. The services industry was estimated to have contracted by 1.2% relative to the corresponding quarter of 2023, reflecting a reduction in real value added for all industries, with the exception of the finance and insurance industry, which grew, and producers of government services, which remained flat. Electricity and water supply. The electricity and water supply industry was estimated to have recorded a downturn in real value added of 5.8%, reflecting lower electricity and water consumption due to the damage to transmission and distribution assets of the utility providers. Electricity consumption fell by 6.9% due to lower consumption for all 6 categories. Lower sales were recorded for residential, was down 6.7%. General service, that's small businesses using less than 25 kilovolt ampere kVA, was down 5.7%. Power service, that's large businesses using more than 25 kVA but less than 500 kVA, was down 6.8%. Large power, that's businesses using more than 500 kVA, was down 6.5%. Largest power, single locations with a minimum peak demand of 2,000 kVA, was down 10.6%. And street lighting and traffic signals was down 6.4%. Water consumption declined by 1%, reflecting the net impact of a 5.4% decline in the Western Division and a 1.5% increase in the Eastern Division. Lower consumption was recorded in 9 of the 14 parishes, led by Manchester, down 15.9%, St. Mary, down 8.5%, St. Elizabeth, down 7.5%, and St. James, down 6.7%. Transport, storage, and communication. Real value added for transport, storage, and communication was 2.8% lower than in the corresponding quarter of 2023. This was due to lower levels of activities in both the transport and storage and communication components, reflecting a decline in the air transport component, largely reflecting a reduction in passenger movement by 7.8% due to departures down 7.8% and arrivals down 8.2%, and a decrease in maritime transport activities caused by a 9.7% fall in total cargo handled and a 22.7% contraction in cruise passenger arrivals. Cargo handled at the Port of Kingston and outports fell by 5.8% and 22.6% respectively. Wholesale and retail trade, repairs, installation of machinery and equipment, WR trim. Real value added for the WR trim industry was estimated to have contracted by 1.4% due to an estimated real decline of 4.6% in the level of real gross sales and a downturn in the related agriculture, construction, and manufacturing industries, as well as a weakening in business confidence, down 8.6%. Lower sales were recorded for 6 of the 8 categories, including hardware, building supplies, and electrical goods and machinery, down 9.2%, motor vehicles, auto repairs and accessories, down 8.9%, minerals, fuels, lubricants and petroleum products, down 7.8%, and wholesale and repair of household goods and office equipment, down 4.8%. Finance and insurance services. Real value added in the finance and insurance industry grew by 1%. This outturn was attributed to greater revenues earned at deposit-taking institutions from net interest income, fees, and commission. Hotels and restaurants. Real value added for the hotels and restaurants industry was estimated to have contracted by 2.1%. Preliminary data indicate that foreign national arrivals for July to September 2024 was 633,993 visitors, representing a decrease of 3.1%. Looking at GDP performance for January to September of this year. For the first 9 months of 2024, real GDP was estimated to have decreased by 0.4%. This reflected lower real value added of 1.2% for the goods producing industry, as the services industry remained flat. The most significant declines were recorded for construction, down 2.9%, and wholesale and retail trade, repairs, installation of machinery and equipment industry, down 1.4%. Among the industries that recorded growth for the 9-month period were hotels and restaurants by 2.1%, and finance and insurance services up 1.9%. Looking now at the employment update. Regarding the employment update, the April 2024 Labor Force Survey undertaken by the Statistical Institute of Jamaica, STATIN, represents the second report since the new series began. Recall that STATIN indicated that the January 2024 Labor Force Survey, LFS, represented a break in the data series to incorporate the recommendations from the 19th, 20th, and 21st International Conferences of Labor Statisticians of the International Labour Organization, ILO. Consequently, the April 2024 Labor Force data is not comparable with the report for the corresponding period of 2023. Notwithstanding, the highlights of the April 2024 Labour Market Survey are as follows. The unemployment rate was 4.2%, with male unemployment at 3.3% and female unemployment rate at 5.3%. The youth unemployment rate was 14.8%, with male youth unemployment at 13.6% and female youth unemployment at 16.4%. The employed labor force stood at 1,420,300 as at April 2024. Males accounted for 53.7% of the employed labor force, with females at 46.3%. The unemployed labor force was 62,800 persons as at April 2024. I'll now turn to an update on Vision 2030 Jamaica, National Development Plan, NDP. Note, the achievement of developed country status is representative of the achievement of a full slate of targets aligned with the social, economic, environmental, socio-political, and governance dimensions of a country. National development performance has been mixed since 2009, when Vision 2030 Jamaica and the adoption of long-term national development planning were launched. Since then, over 60% of indicators measuring national development progress towards attaining the long-term national goals and outcomes have recorded improvements, 60%. The country has made important progress in building the regulatory and institutional framework for social protection, education and training, health, the business environment, environmental sustainability, justice, security, and governance, including local governance. The per capita rate for serious crimes has been on a downward trend, even though the level of crime and violence remains too high. Poverty has generally been on a downward trend, with rates showing increasing resilience to shocks. Provisions for social and income security have been strengthened, particularly in the tourism, sport, and culture and creative industries. The country has improved its energy efficiency and integration of renewables in the energy mix. The performance to date suggests that the objective of achieving developed country status will likely not be achieved by 2030. Note, however, that falling short of achieving the objective of developed country status is not synonymous with a lack of development and growth. Jamaica's current growth profile is more aligned with that of countries working towards being defined as emerging economies on the path to higher levels of development. Progress towards developed country status has not been without challenges. Note, Jamaica has faced two major global crises since the development of the National Development Plan. The 2008 global financial crisis, with the impact extended over the next decade, and the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic. As an upper middle-income country, as an upper middle-income small island developing state, SIDS, Jamaica has recognized vulnerabilities owing to size, location, terrain, and climate change. We're in one of the most vulnerable regions in the world. Additionally, natural and other vulnerabilities place strains on economic activity, competitiveness, and growth. However, within a context of insufficient growth and the damage and loss due to frequent disasters, redirecting economic resources to address these shocks have stymied public investments necessary for promoting growth and development. The shocks, crises, and related global dynamics have had not only impeded development prospects for Jamaica, but also in the wider global community, where it has been reported that the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, are unlikely to be met in all countries. The next steps in the implementation of Vision 2030 Jamaica and pursuing long-term national development include the execution of a comprehensive evaluation to inform the development program to 2030 and the preparation of the development agenda for the post-2030 period. The lessons learned from implementation to date demonstrate the importance of social contracts to achieving national development goals. The PIOJ will engage the range of stakeholders to inform the way forward. The PIOJ will also continue stakeholder engagement through strategic partnerships, initiatives, and information sharing to advance the national development planning process. Looking at the short-term economic outlook, October to December 2024, calendar year 2024, and fiscal year 2024-25. Generally, the prospects for Jamaica are negative, due largely to the lingering effects of Hurricane Beryl on the economy, compounded by several other hydrological events. The passage of Hurricane Beryl and the associated damage and loss disrupted economic activity and adversely affected macroeconomic performance. The cost of damage and loss associated with the passage of Hurricane Beryl was estimated at $32.2 billion, or 1.1% of 2023 GDP for Jamaica. Damage and loss in the infrastructure sector accounted for almost 50% of the total at $15.9 billion. This was led by damage to transport infrastructure at $10.3 billion, followed by damage to electricity infrastructure at $4.1 billion. Looking ahead, all industries, with the exception of agriculture, construction, hotels and restaurants, and other services, are expected to record growth in the short term. For agriculture, it is anticipated that the industry will return to a growth path in the new fiscal year 2025-26. This as some crops impacted by weather events, which continued into October to December 2024, require 3 to 6 months for recovery. The construction industry is anticipated to be impacted by the downturn in capital expenditure on infrastructure works due to work stoppages associated with the hydrological events and the resultant delays in the disbursement of funds. For the hotels and restaurants and other services industries, the continued impact of the travel advisories, as well as industrial disputes which impacted operations at some hotels, are expected to temper the performance. Within this context, the economy is anticipated to contract for the remainder of this calendar and fiscal year. For October to December 2024, it is projected that the change in real value added will be within the range of negative 1.5% to 0, resulting in calendar year outturn, that is January to December 2024, within the range of negative 1% to 0. This projection is further supported by preliminary data received for October 2024, which indicate a downturn in the hotels and restaurants industry. Provisional data reflect a decline of 1.1% in airport arrivals to 194,830 visitors. However, the mining and quarrying industry is anticipated to record a positive performance during October to December 2024. Data for the month of October 2024 indicated that alumina production grew by 18.6%, while crude bauxite production declined by 9%. For fiscal year 2024-25, the projection is for an outturn within the range of negative 1.5% to 0. So in summary, preliminary data indicate that the Jamaican economy recorded a downturn during the review quarter due to the impact of Hurricane Beryl. This impact, compounded by subsequent hydrological events, including Tropical Storm Raphael, are expected to negatively impact output during October to December 2024. Although the overall performance of the economy is projected to stabilize during the January to March 2025 quarter, with a flat performance projected, the agricultural industry is not expected to recover until the first half of fiscal year 2025-26. These and other shocks have hindered the country's ability to realize sustained economic growth. This highlights the need to re-examine and prioritize the plans and initiatives to address the challenges that have hindered the country's ability to foster more robust and sustained growth. And this is particularly important given Jamaica's legislated target of achieving a debt to GDP ratio of 60% or less by fiscal year 2027-28. The Prime Minister yesterday outlined the tenets of the Aspire Jamaica program as the country focuses on generating more robust levels of inclusive growth. Critical to the program is engendering higher levels of productivity, that is, increasing output per worker. Specifically, the central tenets of the program are: 1, human capital development, which will involve a comprehensive transformation of the education system. 2, diversification of Jamaica's economic base through the development of new industries by strengthening intersectoral linkages, positioning Jamaica as a logistics hub, increasing investments in the creative and cultural industries, supporting initiatives to enable Jamaica to become a digital society. For example, the full rollout of the National Identification Cards, NIDs, and expanding the broadband network to provide internet connectivity for all households and communities. 3, infrastructure development with a focus on improving the road network, expanding the water supply network, and diversifying the energy mix. 4, easing the cost and speed of doing business through the removal of unnecessary barriers to doing business. 5, strengthening security through a dual focus approach on short-term measures and long-term initiatives to reduce the burden of security costs on households and businesses. And 6, fostering inclusive growth through supporting the most vulnerable groups in the society. Pivoting to this phase of Jamaica's economic development will require whole of society collaboration to generate robust, transformative, and inclusive economic growth that creates opportunities for all Jamaicans. In closing, I want to recognize a very dedicated and hardworking team here at the PIOJ and encourage us all as Jamaicans to sustain our efforts to make Jamaica the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. Thank you. God bless you all. May God continue to bless Jamaica land we love.
Thank you, Dr. Henry. The floor is now open for questions. Use the raise hand feature or the chat in the Zoom, after which you will be identified. Once you have been identified, please give your name and organization that you are representing. I'll repeat. You may now ask the Director General any questions, any burning issues that you have.
It's very clear.
Or it may have been extremely clear.
Question.
In the meantime, I'll apologize for the slides not being shown at intervals. We had some technical difficulties, but we will be posting everything online. So as soon as we are finished here, you will be able to view. Question.
Yes, thank you. Given the data that you shared, would it be unfortunate to assume that we're in a recessionary environment?
So thank you for the question. A recession is typically defined theoretically as 3 consecutive quarters of decline in terms of economic growth. And we are not projecting that at this point. No. As we're saying, we are seeing some stabilization coming into first quarter next year, first quarter calendar year, next year, the January to March quarter. And we would expect pickup over time going forward into the medium term. And so we wouldn't define at this point for Jamaica being in recession. And I'll ask James Stewart if he wants to add anything.
Well, the only thing I would add is that a recession is also usually accompanied by weakness in the labor market.
Correct.
And we are not seeing any signs of weakness. In fact, we're seeing a strengthening in the labor market developments. So no, we are not anticipating a recession at this time.
If you note in recent times that sort of conundrum in the US economy where they saw output declining, but employment continued to pick up at some very robust paces, and so they concluded no recession there. And so, but thanks for the question. I think it's a very important one.
Thank you. There seem to be no questions, Dr. Henry.
Was clear.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us and participating in this briefing. Today's presentation, as I indicated earlier, will be uploaded to our website and that of Vision 2030. You may go there and get all the information you want. If not, send us an email and we will respond. I'm seeing something here, I'm not sure. Yes. Yes, DG, there is a question. Good day. What is the PIOJ's role, if any, in the newly announced policy push Aspire? And how is it different from the PIOJ's IGIF tool?
All right, so thank you very much for the question. So our role would remain largely the same in terms of being very collaborative, supportive in driving a lot of the framework for analysis, policy, recommendation, advice. We do quite a bit as we look in the context of Aspire. We would see what is outlined, and you would pick any of the initiatives, any of the tenets outlined. If you look at human capital development in terms of productivity, we were asked not long ago by the cabinet to examine a productivity framework. And we've been collaborating with other entities just in a lot of analysis around that. We made recommendations around how to enhance productivity. So you'll hear more about that. We do a lot of analysis in terms of the economic and social aspects, environmental aspects, in terms of implications for the country, as well as forecasting. We want to do more foresighting, but more forecasting at this point, as we've offered today. We do the assessments in the context of the broader development progress and assessment for the development progress of the country. So we continue, we house the Vision 2030 National Development Plan Secretariat, through which we implement the SDGs for Jamaica. And so we continue those analysis. We do a lot of integrated work. So while we speak of Vision 2030 and the SDG implementation, it's in the context of collaboration within the institution with our economic and social divisions that look at many of the implications and aspects of the growth program. So we are part of that economic framework and management. Remains the same. We've, as Prime Minister mentioned yesterday, that in about 2010, then Prime Minister Bruce Golding had asked the PIOJ to help to develop this growth framework, which was now the Growth Inducement Program. It was commissioned then and through the work of the PIOJ, with some consulting support in some aspects, but largely driven by the work of the Institute. We created the growth framework, which a lot of what is, as Prime Minister said, does build on in terms of the same framework, in terms of agreement, consensus on what are those main constraints, and relatedly, what would be those drivers of growth. And so we've identified and agreed as a country, following sort of analysis, also supported by analysis by our development partners, as to what will be those levers and areas of prioritization and focus. So we remain part of a team, as was said yesterday by the PM, as said by ourselves. It's always a collaborative effort. So growth is not any one entity, it's all of us working together. It speaks about a collective mindset for the country, especially as we speak about enhancing productivity. Those are collective mindset and a collective effort. So I think it will require that sort of initiative. If I can speak a little bit, I was just asking about speaking to Pisha Brian Lee, the head of Vision 2030. I think we can't emphasize enough when we speak of the development journey of the country, and I like the analogy that the Prime Minister used when he says, you would pivot. It's always moving that ball forward, moving towards that goal, but it's a process. And so persons have thought in recent times that Vision 2030, because we said in our last briefing that we will not likely achieve developed country status by 2030, they thought mistakenly that it was not important and we had not made significant achievement and improvement in a number of our indicators. Jamaica continues to perform relatively better than many comparator countries. As we reported, no country, we were just, I think, collectively disappointed as we heard the report at the UN level that said that no country is going to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, the targets as outlined by 2030. And then they said maybe 15% of the SDG targets, 16% on target to be met by 2030. 16. And so we are in I think a global sort of crisis in terms of development with many issues, many factors are contributing. But as we look at the progress we've made as a country, and yes, we need to improve across a range of areas, but we've made progress. And so we want to say, as we've said here at the PIOJ, we're going to do some more in terms of communication, but Vision 2030 is still a key, right? So it's very important that we continue to watch the indicators, and the dashboard of indicators are important because it helps to highlight progress, helps to highlight performance, and then brings into focus those areas in which we may be falling behind and need to give greater attention and priority. All right, so thank you for the opportunity to elaborate. James, let me ask James.
Just to add that the IGIF
Yes.
is a framework by which we'll be able to better measure inclusive growth. So it includes not only the indicators on the economy, but also the social and environmental indicators.
And
so
IGIF means, for those who don't know,
inclusive growth index framework. All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, join us again in February when we will present on the performance of the economy for the October to December 2024 period. Have a good day and stay safe as we strive to make Jamaica the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business.